Welcome to the Cherry Picker, also known as Edward versus Zach, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zach Cherry, and with me as always is...
Not my arm! Eddie of Edward is Truth.
And today we are talking about Freddy versus Jason.
Uh-huh.
Very, very fitting for us.
Which one do you think you are of the two? Do you think you're more Freddy than Jason?
I don't... No, I don't think... Like, if you and I had to compare ourselves to any of, like, the horror heavyweights, I don't think that either one of us would be Freddy or Jason.
Yeah, probably not.
No.
But if we had to, like, if we were gonna, like, do a Comic-Con panel and cosplay... Who would you rather be, Jason or Freddy?
I wouldn't want to be either of them. I'm sorry, I don't mean to like take an out from your question there, but I
This is so.
I don't aspire to be like. I mean, if you like threw Michael Myers in there, I'd be like, yeah, I can get down.
Of course,
that,
or Ghostface,
or
well, what if it were
Chucky.
Michael Myers?
You know, we love a good Chucky.
If you could be Michael Myers or Ghostface, which would you choose to cosplay as?
Well, I mean, I already have I would turn my camera. The ghost. Just the ghost face in my corner, which I've never shouted out. I should thank specifically Scream Robes who made that. So yeah, I have it on display there. But really great quality ghost face robes. You should check them out. Yeah, I don't know. I probably. I mean, I like the Friday the 13th movies probably more than the Nightmare movies, and I know that you like the Nightmare movies more than the Friday the 13th movies, so I think just by association you would be Freddy and I would be Jason in this scenario.
Okay. Wow, it'd be really hard not to bully you.
and I don't think you would be very good at it. Just as much as Freddy's not good at it.
I'd have to channel Freddy. Like, you know, when you... Robert Englund has always said, when you put that glove, and everybody who has ever worn it since says, when you put that glove on, something shoots through you, like an energy. So I'd put the glove on, you know.
And you would just become, you would become Freddy. Anyway, released August 15th, 2003. Yes. This is the 20-year anniversary. I don't know if I want to wish it a happy birthday, because... it
feels older somehow than just... It's like 20 years sounds like almost nothing.
Well, you know what? This movie is almost nothing. When you really break it down. But...
bury the lead.
Oh, gosh. I'm not even going to sugarcoat how I feel about this steamy turd. But, yeah, it's interesting because this was a movie that was a really long time in the making. They had planned on doing this as early as 1993, as far as I know, like with the conclusion of Jason Goes to Hell, once New Line had acquired the rights to Friday the 13th. So it's weird to think that it was like that was 10 years before it actually came to fruition, because it felt like a lot longer. Like, I did not really become conscious of these franchises really until I reached a certain age, probably when I was 15, we'll say, or 14, whatever, like late 90s, when I knew of like Freddy and Jason and all that.
Sure.
And before that, I think Freddy versus Jason was there a comic book or like a graphic novel or some sort of...
After the fact, there have been numerous
but beforehand...
Prior to it, no.
But there was...
Because
it was a
nobody
thing,
could
though.
agree on a story.
But it was a thing, though. Like people had, whether it was like art or something.
Oh, yes.
Or even like back in the old days of the internet, the ancient days of the internet with the dial-up modem,
Zach.
when you would find... No. You would like search up like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, and you would find these like fan sites of just sort of like whether it was like fan fiction or just like images of Freddy versus Jason, and just being like, Freddy versus Jason, it's gonna happen. And if you like went to like a website like upcoming horror movies, there'd be like movies that are in production hell, Freddy versus Jason. Like, it just
Right.
wasn't happening. And that span of time, you know, when I first kind of like became a horror fan, it felt like this was never happening. This was like something that was never going to happen. And then it finally did happen, and it was like, this shouldn't have ever happened.
Okay, well, I have a lot to address in terms of like response to the movie and how it has, I guess, I don't know about evolved, but how it's shifted, shall we say, over the years.
Sure.
But just to speak to pre-internet era, for anyone listening who, you know, for the benefit of anyone who has never existed without the internet, pre-internet, I was growing up in the 80s, and I remember as soon as Freddy was a mainstream figure, a recognizable figure. I remember I was in the 3rd grade, so it must have been like 87 or so. And I just remember Freddy Krueger, masks everywhere, tiny little preschoolers dressed as a child molester and killer, you know, with a stripy shirt and a great big giant mask that's too big for them.
Was he
and
a child
glove.
molester in the original canon?
In the original version of the script, he was, and it remained subtext in the final theatrical release. I think we covered that when we talked about Nightmare. Did we talk about Nightmare already? We've
done the first 2 Nightmares. We've done the first 2 Nightmares, and we've done the first 2 Fridays. So we're jumping ahead here. But I mean, that's what I want to say. Like, this movie, for all intents and purposes, is a merger of the 2 franchises, but. It's not, there's nothing about this that's really Friday the 13th. In fact, because like New Line, they don't give a shit about Friday the 13th. They were more Nightmare focused. But even like that, and that's why it feels more of like a sequel to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. But even then, it just does not feel like a Nightmare on Elm. It doesn't feel like anything. It just feels like early 2000s, like the shit that they were pumping out at that time. And you know, we'll get into that. But
the concept in and of itself had existed in arguments in schoolyards for like the longest time. People arguing who would win in a fight between.
It was
Freddy
the
versus
original
Jason. I remember
cherry picker.
Yeah, I remember having those arguments.
We're not
with
killing
people.
them.
And one thing that I think is a strength of the movie, I mean, you know, they're limited, but I think, but one of the things I do find, like, and there's a lot to cover here, but one of the things that I think kind of got salvaged by Jeff Ross, who was an intern prior to the wheels really turning on this project at New Line, and his dream project had always been to work on Freddy vs. Jason because he grew up with these movies, had a meeting with you know, some of the bigger heads of New Line, the people who make the decisions. I don't know if it was Sarah Risher or Bob Shea or who, but he got some people to sit down. He laid out like the important tenets of like what should exist in a project like that, and they were like, "Wow, okay, you're an executive now," and so he was largely the engine going forward, you know, trying to process through scripts and concepts and things like that.
So he had no background in like. So yeah, he had no background in anything. He was just a fan that came in and they gave him
that
the time
was
of
New
day.
Line. He had written fan letters to Bob Shea that Bob Shea still had, like long after that, when they were making like Never Sleep Again and Crystal Lake Memories and all of these documentaries looking back. There's like in a child's script with like drawings of Freddy, with him telling him how much he loves Freddy and how much he wants to come work for New Line. So he living the dream. Good for him. But
good for him, bad for.
Well, this is the thing. It could have been a lot worse. Really, when you hear some of the concepts that they had initially, like there were drafts where Freddy had molested Jason when he was a little boy before he got killed, that Freddy had molested him and he was the reason Jason died because he killed him to quiet him so no one would ever find out that he molested him, or that he had raped Pamela Voorhees and he was Jason's actual father. I mean, there was, and then there was a whole other thing where the Fred heads, like there was a cult.
You know what? I'm glad it didn't happen.
Yeah,
we don't have to worry about it. Anyway, before we get into a premise, I just want to thank a few new Patreon supporters. So, welcome aboard to Hamish, David Butt, and Dakota Sloan. Thank you for becoming Patreon supporters of mine and by proxy the Cherry Picker podcast. All of your support is appreciated, and it does go towards, first of all, getting early access to all of our episodes, but also getting to view our bonus episode, the Cherry Picker After Dark, which airs every month. More on that later. And I also wanted to say thank you to Boy Cried Wolf, who is our editor now. So thank you, and thank you. If you would like to support us, you can head over to my Patreon, Zach Cherry, and find me there. We really appreciate it. Edward, do you have a premise that you want to grace us with?
I do. This was ripped from IMDb.
Okay.
From Film Fan, and I modified it as usual. But how would you like to hear it? You have a preference?
I just thought you were going to do it in the Pamela Voorhees, not Betsy Palmer, but the
Paula Shaw. That is the actress's name.
Oh, she's
who plays
phenomenal.
her in this
but
movie.
yeah.
I love her.
Paula Shaw.
Yeah, okay.
Voorhees.
It's been nearly 10 years since Freddy Krueger terrorized people in their dreams, and the townsfolk want to keep him erased from their memory. But Freddy still has one more plan on getting back to Elm Street. He resurrects my sweet boy Jason Voorhees and sends him off to kill. The more bodies which fall to the ground, the stronger Freddy becomes. This is until each entity realizes the other isn't going to step aside easily and must be taken down himself as Freddy versus Jason! Huh?
The fuck? For anyone who's been with us for a while, this is kind of... You have to go back and watch the Scream 3 episode. Because we won't cover it too much because we don't want to take up too much Freddy versus Jason time. But the correlation you made, if that was the Maureen Prescott to Sydney and in the version of that movie where Sydney was actually the killer and it's time to rise up, Sydney.
Yes.
But then it like
let them know what fear tastes like, Sydney.
But then I think you didn't mention this part because you brought it up after when we turned off the microphones.
You loved this.
Of just how
that she morphs into Roman.
Yeah, like Maureen would have morphed into Roman, and then just his like
said, "I've been away from Woodsboro for far too long." Yeah, that one killed you. You're like, "Oh, we didn't get it on." Now we have it on record.
Yeah.
People probably aren't even laughing, but we laughed, so that's good.
I had some good feedback for that. But anyway. Why don't you start us off here? Because you seem to be more positive about Freddy versus Jason.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can be negative too. This is the thing. I watching it, particularly this screening, it made me realize how well I know this movie.
Yeah.
But I still pick up on things here and there. Maybe, sometimes they are things that are like glaring omissions or like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. But I think I've seen it often enough that like a lot of the minuses are because they're expected. I've kind of embraced them. It's kind of like the child who always disappoints me, but I'm not going to kick them out of the house. It's a child. It's my child. And okay, I know for a fact that I do quote unquote like this movie because years ago, maybe in like the late 2000s before 2010, I was in one of the last remaining Blockbuster video stores. And like just a few blocks from my house, and I was looking for something to rent for the evening and everything, and I heard two kids who were like probably, I don't know, 13, 14, 15, somewhere in that vicinity, early teens. And they were looking in the horror section too for something, and one picked up Freddy vs. Jason and said, "Oh, why don't we rent this?" And I heard the other one posit, "The movie is dumb." And the person put it back, and then they just kind of walked away. And I remember I took offense. I was like, how can you just dismiss it like that? It's fraught with flaws, for sure, but I don't need, and I really kind of got like a little angry. I drove home kind of going, it's not dumb, you're dumb. Who talks like that?
You didn't actually drive home.
Like,
you followed them and ran them down with your car.
Yeah.
I can't get over like his just like pause it. As you say, just like the movie is dumb.
Oh, it was a her, I believe. I don't know what their pronouns were or identity or anything, but on the face of it, female presenting, going, the movie is dumb. And I was like, what?
Okay.
You're shut up.
You're dumb.
And when somebody like puts something down, and if it affects me in any way where I feel defensive, then obviously I have a place in my heart. There's room in my heart for this movie. So let's put it that way. But what was your reaction? Did you see it in the theaters at all?
I saw it, yeah. Well, because I was anticipating this for a while. I think a friend and I had even made our own fan fiction at one point.
Yeah. Wow.
Which probably, I mean, to be fair, probably wouldn't have been too far off from the temperament of the movie, at least.
Sure.
But I don't really go back and revisit this one. Like, I only really watch it if like we're doing the podcast or,
right.
Yeah, if I have to like have a complete marathon. Because even then, like, I don't want to get too much into the Friday movies because I do have like a preference of which ones I will rewatch.
Sure.
But to me, it's just like this one is just full of all of the things in that, because this came out the same time, like a year later after Halloween Resurrection, and it has a very similar studio feel to it of just like, the writing doesn't matter. We just have to give them what they want. Like, this definitely has a higher quality budget in terms of what they offer comparatively to Halloween Resurrection. But even as I like starting to watch the movie, because I think that opening sequence, not really the sequence around it, but like the actress playing the new Mrs. Voorhees, that's, to me, that is campy. I like that. Because we've talked about camp a lot before, and camp is like, it's unintentional. It has to come from a place of passion and commitment that you didn't intend to turn out that way, but it just kind of happened. And there are definitely moments, I think that performance, absolutely, and I think probably when they were directing it and they had written it, they wanted that to be more serious, but just because of the way that it's delivered by that actress, it's just like, it's high camp. And then I would say the rest of the movie is just kind of, it's there. The climax is elevated a little bit more because I feel like the characters, like Laurie in particular, like when she delivers that line, she's just like, no! Freddy has destroyed yours and my childhood, and I'm not going to rest until I see him die! Or whatever she says.
Yes.
And it's that energy, because it's just like, she's so into it. Like Ronnie Yu, who also directed Bride of Chucky, by the way, like they're probably just like taking this very seriously. And that's it. Like, this is the fight between them at the end, where I don't even know what they're on, what that construction site is or whatever. But even for like its ridiculous moments, I'm like, why couldn't the whole movie have been this? This is all I needed, because I like so much of the movie is these characters, and they're so one note, they're so unlikable. Most of the movie, it's like the dialogue is either just kind of, I guess, what the writers in my mind would imagine, like, this is what teens talk about regularly, and this is how they sound, this is how they behave. And then everything else is like exposition. Yeah. But the exposition is so ridiculous, and not in like a fun, campy way. It's just like the whole movie is these characters basically piecing things together that make absolutely no sense if you were to think about it logically, but somehow they figured it out. And I think a great example of that is the line like, wait, Freddy died by fire, Jason by water. How can we use that? Which is inaccurate, but it's still like the way that like every scene they just kind of, there's nothing that's really leading them other than the conversations that they had. And that's the whole movie, is just like going scene to scene to figure out what's going on. And it's all exposition. There's so much that probably could have been taken out, and we could have had more Freddy versus Jason in here. That I don't know, like right off the bat when we're introduced to the friends, like the three girls there, and they're talking about they're just like literally just drinking beer and smoking and their boyfriends
the Three
or their
Stooges,
lack
Marry,
of
Fuck,
boyfriends.
Kill.
Yeah, Marry,
Marry,
Fuck,
Fuck,
Kill.
they're playing.
The Three Stooges, and it's just like this isn't giving me anything. Like I don't know, like. I'll always go back to Scream and Sidney Prescott because I think that is like the golden standard of just like presenting like all the characters in that movie, but just like presenting a final girl. And I know this is a different temperature. This is not to be taken as seriously as at least the first Scream movie, but we get so much more with so much less when it comes to like at least that first scene with Billy and Sidney. And here, it's just like, oh, like. You're never gonna be happy with like seeing anyone because your heart is like stuck with Will, this kid that abandoned you and never called you or wrote you like years ago, and it set up this thing that like Laurie as a character and her friends, but Laurie in particular is like completely defined by the men in her life, and. Yes. You and I have actually talked about this before, so I'm not taking ownership over this because but I want to specifically make sure that we mention this because Laurie as a character, and by the way, I want to say something about Monica Keena after, but Laurie as a character, she's either defined by Will, her father, or Freddy. There's nothing about her in particular that's just like that we know. And her friends are terrible people. I do like Gib. But what's Kelly? What's her character's name?
Oh, Kelly Rowland is oh shit! Now it just went out of my head. Keep talking, I'll tell you.
Yeah, completely forgot. That's how little I care. But her whole
she's
thing.
Kia, like
Kia,
a car.
Yeah, she's named after a car. Kia's whole thing, her whole shtick is just like. Kind of like pressuring Laurie to like do things that she's not comfortable with and just bad. It's just like she's literally pushing her to go upstairs and like fool around with this guy that is like gross and she has no interest just because it's just like, oh, you're so repressed, you need to do this. And it's just like, I fucking hate your friends. Or at least, a select few of them. All of the other characters in this movie are like they're one note again. There's nothing really going on in them, and they're either just driven by, like whatever their shtick is. Like you have Linderman, who's just kind of like he's the geeky guy. He likes Laurie, but then it's just like why is he there? The stoner guy, another character I don't even know his name. Why is he there? These are characters they could have survived. Purely by being like, whoa, this has nothing to do with us. I'm just going to hang out at home. But they're somehow all in this fucking movie because the movie needed to have characters.
Wow. You had a lot to purge.
I fucking hate them. I
know.
I cannot with them. And they're the movie. They're like the heart and soul of this movie. Like just bringing it along until we get to the Freddy and the Jason of it all.
Well, see, this comes down to an argument that I've heard a lot, particularly this past decade, but it started before then, but it's really with the advent of the internet and, a lot of people, things tend to kind of like echo chamber, but I'm not going to say that people don't really believe this, but I've heard the line toed over and over again by people, whether they're fans of this particular film or not. It's both sides of the aisle and everybody in between. But most people seem to kind of like agree that the movie is more Nightmare on Elm Street and less Friday the 13th, which I never quite understood because I remember even the first time I watched it, I did not see it in the theater. I saw it, I attempted to watch it 3 times after it was like on demand or whatever. Like it was, I think I rented it in a hotel room one night when I was on a trip with my sister, and we just kind of, neither of us were tired yet, so we thought, oh, let's watch Freddy vs. Jason. I haven't seen it yet, and we tried watching it, and I fell asleep. Tried watching it again in another instance that I don't remember, and I fell asleep again. And then I think I rented it from Blockbuster and tried watching the DVD at my home when I knew I would be awake, and I fell asleep again. I just kept nodding off, and I'd wake up before it was over, but it just never gripped me, and I thought, I guess this movie's just not for me, because it didn't have enough Nightmare for me, because the angle that always appeals to me with Nightmare, and I think we've kind of covered this before, but really we will with Dream Warriors and everything, so I won't spend too much time on it. But groups of people, even if they are unlikely, kind of like dynamics, like who are kind of like brought together by their trauma and the fact that they are the ones who believe and they're the only ones who can kind of like be there for each other in a way that matters. That's not who these people are. Because nothing matters. And you're right. The way they were introduced, I remember thinking like, well, that feels closer to Friday the 13th, maybe what it morphed into by that point. Like unlikely groups, like some people have histories with each other, but some people are just getting to know each other for the first time. Some people are clashing. Some people have no business being there and they're just kind of thrown in the mix somehow. But the thing is, particularly with like the Paramount era of Friday the 13th movies, for the most part, I enjoy those motley crews of people who, like are like being afflicted by Jason, and they either get it in the head or in the leg or get cut in half or beat against a tree or, like whatever. It doesn't even really have that either. So, and I know from my vast research over the years that Ronnie Yu was not a fan of either franchise, had never seen a Friday the 13th movie or a Nightmare on Elm Street movie before, and came to this with just kind of like his own artist palette, shall we say.
Well, I mean, it's very much like it's he has that like Hong Kong kung fu style going into it. Like there's people and bodies just like flying across a room or a field or whatever. Like that's there's just something about the look of this movie that is gross to me. Like it's just like the CGI aside, I don't like there's this like kind of like slowed down moments where he'll do like things in like slow motion, but they're like, it seems like it's sped up and then slowed down, and it gives it this like effect where it's not like, sometimes filmmakers will do that where they'll like play something in reverse because it looks creepy or whatever, and here it just makes it look nauseating, and it's very evocative of the time, because it's just like that's what it's almost like the rave style, because we're even at the rave later, and I know they're definitely using that effect there, and it's just it's like maybe they're trying to go for this like psychedelic rush, and it's just like, oh, this is how you're experiencing it, like you're at a rave, because this movie starts and they're like throwing like heavy metal music at you with like the CGI title. Like there's like a certain impression they're trying to make with this. This is like hardcore Nightmare and Friday the 13th. And to me it's just like, oh, this is just the low rent version. This is from the people who are making this that do not understand either one of these franchises.
Well, I mean, also you're right to mention that it's a product of its era as well. Like that's another thing, is like you kind of throw all these other variables into the mix. Oh, because also another thing Ronnie Yu has gone on record to say multiple times is that he felt that he had learned a lesson from directing Bride of Chucky, not to take the subject matter too seriously. To have fun with it, so the audience won't be affected by the violence, but so they'll just kind of laugh at it. And if that's the movie you want to make, fine. I mean, I think arguably I think it works better in Bride of Chucky, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to that movie. But for this movie, the fact that it's not just like one franchise, it's two franchises that are being incorporated into now kind of like this new flavor, and you can feel that it's been written and rewritten and then rewritten again and then reshaped, and then things have been reshuffled. Like that line that you mentioned that Monica Keena has to utter, which she, herself has come clean about how laughable it is and how out of context it is. It is completely out of context because it was originally part of a script where it was in context, where they were trying to figure out, not just like in a way where they're sitting at a table and she's sitting over there away from the group going, wait, guys, I have an idea. It was literally like them together in the mix, and it was like, well, what can we do? What can we use? What do we know about them? And those things were just kind of like thrown in as some details. And so for that, that's like a perfect example of like what I like and also dislike about this movie, is that it's mindful, it's paying attention to like origin stories and stuff like that of these characters, but is it using but is it using them in any kind of like effective way that actually hits? Like, this movie could have been incredibly brutal. The original intent was to go back to the beginning of both franchises when these guys were scary and make it gritty and everything, and they went the other direction.
It's
they got
interesting
Ronnie Yu making a comedy.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that about Ronnie Yu not taking things as serious, because that's probably, like, first of all, that's why this doesn't reach those levels of camp. But the parts of the movie that do reach the levels of camp are, you know, when Robert Englund really gets to kind of come out and do his thing. So, I mean, like, Robert Englund understood the assignment, absolutely. And I think that Monica Keena, not to say that she necessarily understood or misunderstood, she was just doing what she had to do. And like, especially because, I wanted to say, like, watching her recollection of things, like, she is hysterical. I love her. Like Monica Keena, like, I don't give a shit about Laurie, but Monica Keena makes me like Laurie a lot more because of Monica Keena. And her, just the way she's just like, wait, Freddy died by fire, just like recalling the line in her head and just talking about it. And she was even talking about the graphic novels that came out after the movie, because there was a sequel made in graphic novel form, and because the whole time she's like, I feel bad for Jason, like, I'm team Jason, and she's like, but then I read this comic and he killed me. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude?
So I was wrong. He doesn't have morals. He's just a cold-blooded killer. She says, almost pouting, but because she felt an affinity for him, because, you know, like, she basically kind of teams up with Jason to fight Freddy, which is another sore point for a lot of people who are, especially Jason fans, are kind of like, what are you doing to Jason? He's not a hero. I mean, he kind of has the little boy thing, but, like, not for years. So, like, where's the killer? And, like, where's Kane Hodder? You know, the eternal question.
We'll get to that.
Right, but I think. There's so much to address, but with Monica Keena especially, like, I agree with you 100%. I adore her. I think she did her best with this script, because also she was playing a final girl that belonged to neither saga either. Like, she doesn't really evoke any memories of any of the final girls from Friday the 13th. She's certainly not like a Heather Langenkamp or a Lisa Wilcox or why am I forgetting her name? Patricia Arquette or Amy Steele.
Yeah, she's on an
Adrienne
island
King,
of her own.
any of them.
She's on an island of her own, but she's just. There's still, like, there's moments in her performance that I love, and I think this is where it just, like, comes into, like, where things get campy, because they're just sort of like, all right, I'm supposed to say this line, and it's when she's in his dream, and she's just like, there's a boy drowning. Aren't you gonna come, or whatever? But then there's also
coming.
Yeah.
You mean you're not coming? This bitch is dead on her feet.
That stuff was hilarious. And then she's on the dock, and, like, Jason's drowning, and I can't remember if Freddy's pulling him under at this moment, but she's like, Jason, grab my hand, Jason Voorhees. Because
that's the thing. First she's like, grab my hand, like she doesn't know who he is. Yeah. And then she says it almost like she's recognizing, but I can't remember if we actually see her say it, like, in the shot,
it
or
looked
if
like
it
bad
looks like it might have been looped in later.
Or
bad ADR,
because everything was also slowed down. They did that weird, like, slow motion thing. So it's just like, who knows? But this was another Ronnie Yu point, because he was not an actor's director, if I recall.
Not at all.
From our conversations. No. Like, he was more so just concerned about the technical aspects. And if anyone, you know, had any questions about their character, which I doubt anyone did anyway, because it's just like...
One tried. It was the guy who played Jason Ritter's friend, Brendan Fletcher, who played Mark. He tried to ask him a question about where he was coming from, and I think about, like, you know, like, his relationship with his brother Ronnie. He was just like, don't come to me with that. And just sent him away. And it's like, wow, okay. And you can feel it. I don't think any of the actors per se, I mean, well, okay, there are some decisions that are made that don't work. I think Kelly Rowland is not an actress at this point in her career. I don't know if she is one now, but
I don't think so, yeah.
No, but I mean, Kelly Rowland's another one who, when I see her, I like her. But But among the crop of actors they had, there's a lot of talented young people who you can tell, if we're not feeling it from them even, like these are actors who are adrift, who are without any kind of direction, which is exactly what you need from a director. So that's a shame it's a flaw of the piece, like overall. Like Robert Englund, I think, is Freddy. Thank God.
Yeah, he doesn't need any
not
direction.
Just in the makeup and not. Yeah. No. Yeah, he's Freddy. He can bring it. He can take any script and probably be Freddy in it, which is great. And actually, just to speak to Ken Kersinger's, performance. There are elements of it that are performance. He doesn't do much, but I get an intent from Jason and a looming quality and everything like that. I think he's fine. It would have been a completely different movie with Kane Hodder's Jason, because he's just got a different energy about him.
I think that
Jason than Ken Kersinger.
I think that Kane Hodder also would have challenged the script a lot more. And maybe is that why he wasn't? I mean, from my understanding, he was not ever even approached because they wanted someone bigger than Freddy. They wanted someone like monstrous size that would like loom over Freddy. Because Kane Hodder's not. I don't know like what his precise height is, but he's not very tall. If I remember correctly,
there is only a difference of about 2 or 3 inches between the heights of the two men. So anything they needed to achieve with Kane Hodder, they could have with lifts or even with like perspective, the way they shoot, like, Jason and Freddy in the same shot. So I'm wondering if he made somebody nervous or something. Because one thing I do know about Kane Hodder, and we can always go into it more so when we discuss his movies, but one thing, when he is Jason, takes it very, very seriously as a performance and would do things, even as a stuntman, with a stuntman's mentality.
Yeah.
You never want to risk your safety or anybody else's, but when he was quote unquote in character, people got hurt, noses got broken, things happened on the sets that he worked on. And I'm wondering if New Line was at a point with this particular project where they were like, we can't have anybody getting hurt. And so maybe we need somebody who's a little calmer. I'm wondering if it's never been brought up in any interview with anybody, but I often wonder, because you have to think about things like that. Who's a liability and who do you want to put? It's a big project, a lot of money going into it. Maybe it's we hadn't seen a Freddy movie in just under a decade. The last Jason movie, Jason X, had tanked and had, both critically and at the box office. So, and it even got leaked prior, so it pre-tanked. So they had a lot riding on this particular project, and thankfully it paid off in droves because it was the highest at that particular juncture. I don't know if the reboots outsold this one, but at this particular point in history, when this one was released, it made more money than either any Freddy movie or any Jason movie prior. So there you go.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I mean, because he did work with New Line on Goes to Hell and X, so they could have formed that opinion at that point, and it might have even been because if it comes down to the idea that if Bob Shea was more just I don't know anything about Friday, we own Jason, that's all that matters. We're gonna do what we know, and it's almost like. You see this in any workplace. It's just if someone's been around for a long time and a new management comes in, they might just get rid of the old timers because it's just easier to do that. Just pay them out of contract or whatever. Give them their 2 weeks or whatever.
And because they have a history with Robert Englund, and New Line is the house that Freddy built, so to speak, they were never going to make a movie without Robert Englund playing Freddy at least that point.
So it obviously it was important to keep him. And as far as they're concerned, they look at Jason. It's anyone can play him. And I mean, fair enough. That's true. You can get different people to play him. I know Kane Hodder.
They did before Kane Hodder. It was always somebody different.
Always someone different. He was the first one to really kind of stick around, and I think that was more so due to his passion for the role. I think maybe that he could have been intimidating. He could have strong-armed his way into it, but at the same time, it's also if you have someone who's familiar with the role and they want to come back, by all means, keep coming back. It's like, it's, again, it's easier to just have someone who's got experience with it than train someone new on the job.
Ted White, who played Jason in Friday 4, was said, it hasn't been confirmed by like Paramount or anything, but he said that they offered him 5 and he turned it down because he thought, this is small potatoes, I'm bigger than this. And he said that years later he had looked back and wished that he'd taken it on. So maybe other Jasons had been offered and just never took the opportunity. And Kane Hodder, this is the thing, his inaugural performance as Jason in 7, I think is great, is incredibly memorable. It refreshes, it infuses some life back into the franchise at that particular point. And he, yeah, I mean, and maybe that's what kept them bringing him back, kept both studios, because he was there for 2 Paramount films and 2 New Line films.
Yeah. And that was the time between Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X was like a huge stretch of time. I mean, like the movie came out years after it was made for Jason X, but it was still like, when you go between like the Paramount movies that were like pumping them out year after year, to then New Line, which is like, oh, okay, we'll see you in 6 or 7 years. They still invited him back, or he was up for it. So I mean, it's unfortunate for him, because I know that he was like at the height of the Freddy versus Jason fandom, of just people wanting to see this movie.
Yes.
So they'd all these fans had always envisioned Kane Hodder and Robert Englund doing this together. And I think, the fans, they puffed him up that way. He had it in his mind, like, this is going to happen. And then when it finally got to it, it was just like, oh, okay, well, that sucks. And I mean, in terms of Ken Kersinger, like, it's a completely different take on the character. And again, it has nothing to do with him. It's the same, like it's Ronnie Yu mostly, if he's not giving the direction to the characters. But then you could also look at like John Carpenter, when Nick Castle asked him, like, how do you want me to, do this? And he's like, just walk. Just walk, Nick. But I think that's because John knew that like his friend was going to walk a certain way of how he naturally does. But with
that's a direction, though. In and of itself, that is a direction.
It's true. It is a direction.
All right, I'll just walk then.
Rather than just being like, don't bother me with this shit.
Exactly.
That, I don't know. Everything about like the design of Jason and Freddy versus Jason, like it bugs me. I think that's my least favorite of Jason's looks throughout the entire Friday films. Yeah, I just there's something about it. Like I don't like like his skin looks like a seal. I don't know what it is. It's got this like, it's like this shiny gray, like very dark gray, like sheen to it. Like it's like he looks wet, but not really. His head is like, looks kind of shrunken. You've got the eye, which apparently is the wrong eye. They like switched them around, of like whichever one was the dead eye.
It was the one that when he woke up in the close-up, I believe, like the first shot of him when he's underneath the mask and the eyes open up, they were on the wrong side. And I can't remember if they still are or not, and I didn't have the energy to rewind and double check. So.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the look of him in this movie, and just like we talked about in Halloween H2O how Chris Durand, who played Michael in that, just kind of approached it as more like, I'm gonna be a big cat. Like, I'm going to be a panther. And it's just like, no, that's not what it is. But like, nobody was really there to kind of rein him in. But at the same time, when Kane Hodder came into the role, he was like, he did this thing where he would like inhale, exhale. And it's just like, Jason's a corpse. He shouldn't have to breathe. So it's just like, people take umbrage with that. But that was like a really good character decision, because it just like, it added to how imposing he was. In a way. Yeah. And you could look back at every Jason is different. Some of them saunter, some of them run. It's always a different thing. So it's still like in line with who Jason is to like switch things up at this point. But I don't know. I don't need to talk about Kane Hodder or Ken Kersinger.
No. Well, the only thing I will say is just like in terms of direction he gave himself, that at least it was a direction. He thought Frankenstein in his mind when he was playing Jason. I'm like, okay, that's a choice.
Fair enough.
You know, it's not Jason, but it's, you know, it's Frankenstein. Okay, sure. I do have to say, like, another small, like, microcosm of this movie, like, kind of like what this movie stands for with me, is the 1428 house. It's not the Nightmare House. But when you look at it, if you turn your head a little, you're kind of like, it's kind of. That's what this movie, again, that's what this movie is for me. I'm like, okay, Freddy is a little, is a little bit more upfront with the sexual abuse of it all. And the, I remember when I was watching it with my sister when I was awake the first time, I remember we were both sitting there kind of going like, oh, Freddy, like from the moment Robert Englund licks the back of that, it wasn't
that was
Polaroid,
great.
but just the
picture.
I know, but we were both.
That was so Robert
Yeah, and just
Englund.
puts it in his scrapbook. Absolutely. But my sister and I were both like, oh, like it was, you know, movie just started. What's going on?
Like I said, he understood the
just
assignment.
like,
he knows the character.
No, of course. But we were also at the same time like, oh, okay, so we're going right out the gate with Freddy. Oh, but that was another thing. That was one of the things I noticed for the first time that I'm like, oh, I remember this image. Like if you would have been like, Eddie, remember the doll from that sequence, that same sequence that ends with him licking the I would have been like, oh yeah, absolutely. But I didn't realize the way it was staged, because that's another thing. Ronnie Yu doesn't really direct scenes so much as just kind of like introduce environments and just kind of have people say things or do things in them. And maybe it moves the plot along. I don't know. But I realized what was going on in that particular moment. The reality of the moment was Freddy had this little girl's doll and he threw it into the furnace and then to just let it burn, I guess. And I was trying to wrap my head even just around that from the get-go with this movie. I was like, already I'm seeing something that I never noticed for the first time and realized I never processed. And I'm like, so why did he? And then I stopped watching the movie thinking, why would he burn her doll? Well, I guess to take her security blanket, as it were, like away from her. So she's like, you know, just kind of left, because the next time we see her, she's like pinned against the wall, you know, like with her arms kind of like, like, what are you going to do? And it's like, oh, okay. So he wants her to be as scared and as raw as possible. Wow, that's really fucked up. Like, oh, I need to watch the movie. There's a movie going on. But, you know, thankfully I've seen this movie a lot, so I knew that what was coming up was, but I can't come back if nobody remembers me. I can't come back if no one's afraid. I had to escape to the depths of hell, or whatever he says. I cannot do a really good Freddy impression, but just, not my arm! That was another ADR line that I was just like, what? Like, we saw... It felt so un-Freddy. Like, if you cut his arm off, you're like, what? Oh, no! What'll I cut you up with? I don't know, I just thought it was stupid.
Yeah.
But,
no, that's fair.
There are a lot of great lines in this movie, though, for better or worse. Like, there are great lines, like memorable ones. Like, of course, there's the let them know what fear tastes like. But I laugh every time that kid who survives the house, the first kill, and he's sitting there and his father's trying to berate him afterwards while he's sitting on the porch saying like, what were you doing over there? Were you drinking? What are you doing? Meow. And he's just kind of like, my best friend was just killed, Dad! So how about giving me some fucking space? And I'm like, oh, we went right to, wow, okay, we're in the arena of like, this is the kind of stuff that before I watched Buffy, I hadn't watched Buffy yet when I saw this movie the first time. I was afraid this was what Buffy was. It was just a lot of like angsty teens yelling at their parents, you know, and stuff like that. I thought that's what everything on the WB back in the day and then the CW was just a lot of angsty like, listen, Dad, give me some fucking space, and you better watch yourself, son. I mean, literally, that's what we're watching in this movie.
Yeah.
And
which is interesting because the WB, at the time, which is now CW, but at the time, like it's so much more sophisticated than that, because it was like they were teenagers, but they were acting like adults. Like it was almost like the Cruel Intentions thing. It's just like these are like 17-year-olds, but they're like they're playing dress up. They've got like mommy and daddy clothes on, and that was kind of the thing with like shows like Buffy and I never really watched Dawson's Creek, but I imagine like all those other ones, like nobody, like they were angsty, but they weren't like angsty like this. Like this is just
No.
if anything, this is probably more realistic to like how teens are and like would talk to their parents, but like a very heightened, over the top,
like no context really.
Yeah.
Like we never really get to know that character, so. Did he care that much
No.
about his friend?
Oh my God,
Or,
he
like,
was.
What was the nature of that friendship? It didn't seem
He
to
was a
exist for
weird.
me.
He was a weird character. Like he showed up at the house and he had the flask and he's just like looking around. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you got a really great house. Like the feng shui is really great in here. Like he was just like he was trying to obviously like butter her up and like flirt with her, but it was just like doing a horrible job of it. But like even her reactions to it, because she was all like cradling up with Kia. And like she was cold or something and like clearly uncomfortable, and he went to
Right.
like sit down beside her and he was like man spreading, I guess. Like he had his like legs
Yeah.
like open, put his like arm up,
Scratching his balls,
Yeah.
drinking a beer.
and she's just like, hey, why don't you go fetch us some beers or whatever. And he's like, yeah, that sounds like a
Right.
great idea or whatever. Well, Kia's
Yeah.
like, oh my
And,
God,
you
he's
know,
so
Lori's
into
got
you.
some great.
Yeah.
Right. No, and Lori's got some great feng shui. Why don't you go in her bedroom? Why don't you go up and show him your feng shui? And it's like, you're not a friend. You're a
Yeah.
horrible person. You're going to leave her alone with this guy who you don't know and she doesn't know. She's
Yeah.
already told you that she's like hooked up on this other guy, but you've made up your mind. Like already I'm like, I don't root for these friends.
Yeah.
Like,
I
nothing
do
authentic about that
root
for
for
me.
Gib though. I already mentioned earlier
I do
because
too.
she actually feels
Yeah.
like the most authentic person. Like there's a sadness to her. I feel bad for her because it's just like she's clearly insecure and
Right.
dealing with like this shitty boyfriend who just treats her like shit, berates her in front of her friends, and then is like so nasty to her after sex and like even after kissing her and just like, oh,
Right.
menthols, like what the fuck, like whatever he says to her, or just like, don't kiss
know.
me after you've smoked or whatever. And she's
yeah.
and then like after he's dead. Well, first there actually is a funny moment with her when she comes out and discovers the body. With the towel
that is
on.
the first laugh
She was great.
of the movie.
That was the
Yeah.
thing. It's just like that was a character I wish she had stuck around longer because it's like she's entertaining, she's quirky, she's memorable, and it's just like everything from that point on. It was just like it was very maudlin, very melodramatic. You're just at school and she's been like, "Fuck!" Like my boyfriend was murdered. And they're just like, you
And the way
should
she's, like,
come to a
chain
rave, and she's
smoking
just like,
and-
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I could do that, and it's just like, stop letting people like take advantage of you, just like don't.
I
And that's like,
know,
and that's her
but-
thing, and it was.
Well, Catherine Isabel is a consummate actress too, and I
Yeah.
think she always has been. And like, yeah, just the way she wears, kind of like the trauma of the night before. There's that word again. But she literally, like, legitimately does seem affected in a way that isn't, performative or posturing or indicating or anything like that. She's just sitting there chain smoking, just trying to like make sense out of the fact that like, okay, the guy who treated me like shit is dead, and I feel really, really bad about that. But how bad should I really? I mean, she's got her own drama going on inside of her head.
I want it to
And
be
then
in her
but see,
movie, you know?
Yeah, me too. Well, okay, before we go on, she was originally thought, and apparently they did tell her she was originally cast to play Lori. She didn't know she was playing the PJ Souls role of Gib. I think the cap was her idea actually, because she is a horror queen. But she got to, where did they shoot, Vancouver or wherever they were shooting for her first week and everything, and she found out like, oh yeah, there's a loophole in your contract. This happens to predominantly actresses all the time.
Yeah.
But she was just kind of like, oh, I'm not playing Laurie now, I'm playing this other part that fuck, and did not well, it was agitated as anybody would be. Like, I signed a contract in good faith, thought that you guys were hiring me to play the lead in this movie, and now I find out, no, I'm not. Great. But I think she still did an incredible job.
Yeah, there was a lot of like shit. Like there was like casting before this movie came out. Like when I did see the movie, I think I was really disappointed because I was just like, wait, what happened to this person and this person? Like there were a lot of like at one point like Corey Feldman and Lisa Wilcox were attached to it. The main character, the one that's now Jason Ritter, was supposed to be Brad Renfro. And
Yeah,
I don't know if
played
like
by Brad Renfro. Yeah.
when did he pass away? Was it during the production or was it?
No. He I forget exactly when. I'll look it up. But I remember
He got fired because he was having issues.
Yeah, he showed up to set the first day, and all that I can't remember if it was Mark Swift or Damian Shannon. I think it was Damian Shannon, one of the two credited screenwriters. Even though there were still drafts long after they had written their draft as well. They're somewhere wedged in the middle there. But anyway, the two of them, I think it was Damian Shannon was on set, saw Brad Renfro arrive and said it was clear that he was, that his demons had kind of gotten the better of him and that he was not going to be a reliable performer, that we weren't going to be able to count on him to show up on time, to be camera ready and just in the right mindset to be off book and everything like that. And Monica Keena said, she went on the record saying part of the reason she was cast was because they did a chemistry test between her and Brad Renfro, and they thought that the two of them had the best chemistry. So she got hired really partly because of him.
Yeah.
And then when Jason Ritter came in, the only reason that happened was because Ronnie Yu, this is welcome to Hollywood, kids. Ronnie Yu's like, I worked with John Ritter on Bride of Chucky. John Ritter has a son. He's an actor. Let's call him. And then they called him and gave him the part.
Yeah.
And he came over because they needed a replacement quick. And Monica Keena says she loves Jason Ritter to this day. They're still friends. They're still tight.
Yeah.
But she said it was horrible to have to lose one to get the other. In her perfect world, there would have been two. What's his name again? Two Wills.
Yeah.
So that's a sad thing.
And because they have no chemistry, and there's just like his performance is no shade at Jason Ritter, but just like in this movie, it's just like
no.
I just like don't buy this. Like him and his friend, I thought his friend was probably like one of the better characters in this. Another one that I wish was around longer.
Absolutely.
But there's just like
Brendan Fletcher.
Yeah. The like just the scenes of them in the car together, just like the van when they're just like, yeah, like just telling about the story of like the dad is just like, I saw your dad kill your mom, and laughs about it.
I mean, I can understand the ironic thing. This is the thing. I think Jason Ritter is a very capable actor. He's certainly proven himself many times over. But the thing is, number one, we already covered, like, when you have no direction, there you go.
Yeah.
Even a capable actor might, just kind of do something that looks like, why are you doing that? Mm-hmm. And no one says, don't do that. You're just going to do another take. He's going to do it. But that was another thing that I thought while I was watching. I was just kind of like, oh, because Brad Renfro, I think for the first time I really kind of put the goggles on while I was watching, trying to imagine. Brad Renfro has a naturally kind of like imposing thing. Like he seems like, he played a lot of quote unquote like bad kids.
Yeah.
Like always the kind of like the initiator of the drama and rather than kind of like the one being the ping pong ball, kind of like reeling from it.
Yeah.
So, and even if he was reeling, he always seemed to have more control than his cohorts, whoever he was co-starring with, if there were other kids he was working alongside. But there was always like kind of a darkness behind his eyes, and I can understand why that would create more of a red herring where you wouldn't know who to believe. Like the second he tells you, I saw your dad kill your mom, and then the father is like, you got away from my daughter. It'd be like, wow, who's telling the truth? But because it's Jason Ritter, I'm just kind of like, well, it's probably true.
Yeah. Yeah, like from what I remember of Brad Renfro, who by the way passed away in 2008 at 25, R.I.P. Wow. I remember him like he sort of had like a Boy Next Door quality, but with that darkness. And that's what I think made him so interesting and intense and multifaceted in that way. Because I remember, like, everything that I've seen of him, I remember specifically Apt Pupil. Do you remember that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Where he was living next to the Nazi. Because he's, like, pretty fucking disturbing in that. But I could definitely see... I don't really know, like, with Monica Keena. I think that Monica Keena is probably, like, she seems like a very versatile actor. Like I think she could probably do whatever anyone asks. Sure, maybe I'm giving her a lot of credit, but like she seems like someone that like she could do anything. But I could see Catherine Isabelle and Brad Renfro having good chemistry together. Like if she had played the lead, I think that would have been like the best combination.
Oh my
for this movie.
God,
yeah.
that's a whole other movie. That would have been. Oh, now I really want to see that movie, Zach. Why did you?
I mean, the thing is like these horror movies, and especially with like these franchises, are notorious for like the final couple being like the least interesting characters. The ones that just like them. It had to be them. And not that like there's anything about either Laurie or Will that is like particularly egregious. Because I do, like I said, I enjoy Laurie's like pettiness at the end and the high energy. But yeah, Will is just kind of like he's there. But there's definitely worse final couples that I can think of, like in both franchises, or at least within like Friday the 13th.
Yeah, but even people who we follow for the bulk of the movie I mean, because we lose Catherine Isabelle, and I actually like a lot of what the actor who plays oh shit, I have it written down somewhere. What's his name? The one who's basically. No. The one who was basically like Jay from Jay and Silent Bob, but not like
I
what
have
they call
no
him.
idea.
He had a name, and it was like
Freeberg.
They just call him by his last name, right? Yeah. Freeberg. Okay, and I really like that actor. But he, I like a lot of what he does, particularly because he's one of the three people, and I think everyone who plays Freddy in this movie who isn't Robert Englund is also very, very good. Like there's Paula Shaw. And there's the actor who played Freeberg. I'll look up his name in a second. But and then there's also the actor who plays Kyle Labine played Freeberg. And then there's Zach Ward who played Bobby, the brother. They all play Freddy at different points, and I think all of them fucking nail it. I'm just kind of like, yes, that's Freddy. The imposing thing, but also the like sneer. Like I mean, it's perfect. But anyway, Freeberg dies when he's, like possessed by Freddy, when he's doing some of the best work, because I don't really care for Freeberg himself, but I would have liked to have seen him possessed as Freddy a little bit longer or something, because that was fun. But
that
also
actor,
then Catherine Isabelle gets taken out.
That actor was also in Halloween Resurrection. He was one of the kids in the party scene that are like watching the thing, and on the features for Freddy versus Jason, he's kind of like the John Saxon of like the slashers, like because he's like, I've been in a Michael, Freddy, and Jason movie, and I'm like, like good for you, like I don't think like you didn't do a lot in them, but like good for you, because like John Saxon has been in a Alien, Predator, and Terminator, so that's kind of he's like the sci-fi version of that.
Very nice.
Yeah,
very nice. But point is, two characters live longer than the two actors who I've just brought up, and one of them, not to be all binary about it, but like one is a girl, one's a boy, and it is Linderman, and it is Kia. Now, from the get-go, like, and I don't blame Kelly Rowland, like I think Kia is kind of written to be a superficial character, so she's not written with much care. But like, so even when she like has her, I mentioned Catherine Isabelle kind of like being haunted the next day at school when they have the scream scene, like in the courtyard and everything at school. And then there's Kelly Rowland just kind of going like, no, they're treating it like it's some kind of Columbine thing. This is fucked up. This is fucked up. And I'm like, what are you so angry about? You're not even
it's
angry.
It's the Illuminati, just like there's conspiracy theories everywhere.
Which would have been interesting if she would have gone on about conspiracy theories. Like that would have been a thing, but that doesn't seem like that's what that character does. And she has a lot of inconsistencies as a character, like the whole Linderman thing, just like, like calling him out, on, what, I don't even remember what the fuck she says to him in front of Laurie to like humiliate him in the cornfield. But then his defense is such a little weenie thing. Like the last thing you want to do when somebody is bullying you is explain to them why they're treating you the way they're treating you. That is the worst.
But then it worked, because that was kind of like, she was like into it, and that's her character. It's just like she is attracted to.
It's horrible.
Yeah, like to people treating you like shit.
It doesn't make any sense.
And I mean,
exactly.
Can we talk about
it doesn't make any sense.
The big controversial moment here?
Yeah, go for it.
We knew it was going to come up. The little F-bomb there. Because you say that you don't blame Kelly Rowland. I don't really know, because this has never been addressed, other than the writers of the movie saying that they had never had it in their script for her to call Freddy a faggot. And
Right.
that, I even remember watching that at the time because I wasn't, 2003, I wasn't out. I don't even know if I had known personally at that point, because I would have been 18. No, I don't think I knew. Or if I did, I just like was still processing it, but it was still a long time before I, ever came out. And I even remember hearing that and just feeling like attacked in a way, because it was just like it was hard. And especially when you know that like the horror fandom, and maybe like they weren't particularly aware of it at the time because horror wasn't as in vogue as it is now, but like most horror fans, or like a lot of horror fans, are in the LGBTQ community, and it's just like there's something about it that's just like it didn't feel right then, even if I didn't like really fully comprehend everything about it, but it definitely like does not feel right now. And the only thing that's ever been spoken about it is the writer saying, we would never write that. That was not in our script. That was
Damien
ad-libbed.
Shannon and Mark Swift.
Yeah.
Yes, the ones who are credited.
But
as the
nobody
writers,
has ever come forward. We don't know if like that was like Kelly who made up that line on the fly, or if it was Ronnie Yu who was just like, she said it and he okayed it, like, or he could have been like, this feels a little flat. Maybe you should call him that. And so I mean,
okay. There's a lot to address because, like, number one, like Damien Shannon and Mark Swift, they did not get like final draft. Like, obviously, there were other drafts that followed them because there were lines that they wrote that were supposed to be in context otherwise. They didn't write that line because I know what they wrote originally, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the reason why I would never defend the use of that word in that context, but the reason why I didn't blame Kelly Rowland, I think in the past, like the reason I'm just trying to think like right now, why wouldn't I blame her? She was doing a lot of things that she wasn't comfortable with in this movie anyway. Monica Keena went on record to say that like the scene earlier, the other F-bomb she drops when right before they say let's tie the bitch up, when she's like, I know you haven't fucked with Will. Why would he want to? Or you haven't done anything with Will. Why would he want to when he could fuck someone like me? And Monica Keena says Kelly Rowland had the hardest time saying that line because she doesn't talk like that. Yeah. She's a really, really good girl, and she's really, really sweet. And she was so embarrassed that she's gonna have to, but she just committed to it. And when she says it, she doesn't even flinch, and you feel like, and I'm like, okay, I never thought of it in that.
Well, I get that adds a little bit more context to the
her perspective. Here. I don't know. I can understand why nobody came forward to own the previously mentioned F-bomb, because who would want to in this day and age and be like, I'm the one, it was my idea, unless they were an absolute
I think that, but I mean, like, I don't think anyone would like come forward and be like, oh my God, it was me, but just like, the accountability of it and just be like, because it's a stain on this. I mean, there's a lot of stains on this movie, but it's a stain on the movie for sure. Because when I think about Freddy versus Jason, that's one of the first things that comes to my mind. Like, oh yeah, that.
Oh wow. See, it didn't affect. I mean, I was out 5 years by the time I saw this movie, at least. Yeah. And I remember when I saw it, just kind of thinking like, and again, this does not excuse it. I'm not defending it, but I'm saying that the way I perceived it that particular time, and maybe this was my own kind of like ingrained homophobia that I was raised with. Not like I was raised with it. My parents didn't teach me homophobia, but just being in the world and knowing that you have, just somehow knowing you have to be closeted when nobody has ever told me to be closeted. That's a whole other conversation. But I saw the movie, and by the time I was awake for that part, and I saw her drop it, I was like, oh, I was just in the performance of it. I was just thinking like, oh, she's posturing, like, but the character is posturing. She's trying to be really, really bold and puff up her chest and belittle him and say things that are going to agitate him just so he won't go after her.
Her argument is also, I don't even understand it, because she's just like, no, what are you compensating for? And then she says, like, you got these little itty bitty knives, and Jason has this big old, and he's just like,
this great big old.
That's not compensated. That would be Jason compensated.
No. Well, I like the original. Damien Shannon and Mark Swift said their version of the script. I really like this. I thought it was cute and funny, and also it kind of gives you a like little. It kind of chucks you under the chin if you're a fan. Like, hey, thanks for paying attention of the franchises. She apparently didn't confront Freddy. She confronted Jason, And in order to try and try and distill the situation, diffuse it, she starts going like, "I take back every bit of power I ever gave you. You're nothing. You're shit." You know, like the Heather Langenkamp speech,
Right.
almost word for word. And then Jason kind of just, I guess he's getting closer and closer to her, and she just keeps kind of like monologuing to him, and then he just runs her through, and she falls back, and Freddy's right behind her and just says, "Wrong, wrong guy, bitch," or something like that. And it was like, oh, that's funny. That would have been cute. I would have appreciated something like that. Because as a fan, I would have known what she was doing, and I would have been like, but again, they as a group didn't do enough research like the way a Nightmare crew would have to try and figure out what happened before, what could conceivably happen to us. It's like it's kind of half-assed. So that might have felt out of left field too. But like isolated moments, there are little things here and there. You mentioned we already kind of addressed the cornfield scene, but that's actually one of my favorite, at least set pieces of the movie, because at least pacing wise and what's going on aside from the whole Linderman and Kia thing, but now I watch it and I just go, what is that doing here, with a big smile on my face. But everything else, like Catherine Isabel like passing out, and everything with Frizzell, the bleach-haired attempted rapist and everything, and but her like kind of like being in the nightmare, and then Freddy losing the kill to Jason, and it's not ideal. It's not it doesn't happen exactly the way I would have liked to, but it's something I can get on board with. And then Jason in the field lighting it ablaze after they throw the Everclear on him and everything, and call him Jethro and do everything you shouldn't do to Jason, and they both get killed. That's good. Like I mean. Again, it's like it's kind of like I think it's grasping at straws, but it is looking on the sunny side.
I mean, it's nothing about this movie is scary. Not that I ever find like anything. I mean, there are actually that's not true. There are moments in some of the Fridays and some of the Nightmares that are like genuinely like well constructed to be scary, and here it all feels very much like horror in a can. Of just like, this is what we have to do. There's like a very simple formula of like how you make these movies, and it just like it all feels so generic to me. And so I mean I appreciate the setup of the stuff like in the cornfield, but I just find the whole like party rave thing to be not that great. And like this massacre,
style over substance.
This
style
massacre, if you can call it style, but this massacre that ensues, and then they're all driving home, and it's just like, what do we do? And then I think it's Linderman who's just like, I just want to go home. And then there's like what precedes is like them just casually dropping everyone off at home. It's like their friend has just been murdered. All these people have been murdered, and Kia sort of addresses this. She's just like, oh, wow, Gib, I can't believe it. Anyway, call me later.
Yeah, just to check in. All right. It's like, no, you're sleeping over. If this were even remotely realistically written, like, I mean, not that Freddy and Jason, I understand they're not like realistic figures, in a realistic movie and never were, but necessarily. But there has to be some kind of like verisimilitude that you can follow, where at least you care about somebody and what the choices that they're making make enough sense, or if they don't make sense, they don't make sense on purpose for the audience to go, what? Just so they're more engrossed in it because they know not to go through that door, but that, you have to go through that door now because the character is like that. I can accept
a character that I did like. That they actually gave, like they built them up and then did not pay off at all in any way was Stubbs, Officer Stubbs.
Oh yeah,
played by Lachlan Monroe. From Scary Movie.
As for Ryan Phillippe, basically
as that role, I liked him. Well, first of all, because he was the one that he was like pushing back. He was asking the questions. He was like on to something without like fully realizing it, because the town was all like, it's Freddy, we can't talk about it. And he's like, this is the work of Jason Voorhees. So already he's shown to be a competent character. He's likable. He's the one that just stumbles into their little Scooby-Doo basement and just being like, the door was open, and but then being like, I want to help you. And another instance of a character who's like, this is a character you want around, and he's the essentially like the first one killed off after that point. That it's like, why did we waste all this time going through the motions with him if none of it meant anything? Just to kind of, like, the characters themselves, they seem to be doing fine without him because they were piecing things together by pulling ideas out of thin air. Him showing up there really did not add anything to it other than being like, oh, now we have an interesting character. But if you're just going to kill that guy off in like 2 seconds, what's the point?
You know, you get like a momentary relief of, again, like, I guess a figure of authority kind of believing the story of the kids, and you think that he's going to help them. But, and again, if it were set up properly, like either he would be there, you know, almost to the end, maybe even make it, and, you know, but, you know, they've got backup and he's there for a reason, or he's a red herring and it's like, we think we're going to follow this guy through it. But they didn't even really necessarily set him up like that. Everybody's kind of introduced as expendable. Like, any of them could be stripped out of the movie or not stripped out, and it wouldn't really affect the course of the film, and that's kind of sad. And again, in that way, it makes me feel like this isn't more of a nightmare movie than a Friday the 13th. I do have to say, after the exchange between Laurie and Kelly Rowland Kia, with it just to check in and all that, we have the confrontation. We have, of course, the disclosure from Will, and then the confrontation between the two of them, and Monica Keena screaming her lungs out. And she says one of my favorite lines when she marches back into the house and starts screaming at her father, when she just says, "Why didn't you tell me about Weston Hills? Do you work there? Because I thought you were a fucking general practitioner!" It's so... It's just got this manic quality that it may as well be in a comedy, because it's that level of anger. It is a comical... laughable level of anger, but I don't doubt her commitment for a minute. It's that same thing that has her grinding her, you know, her vocal cords in the finale when she's, you know, screaming gutturally.
And
like
welcome to my world, bitch.
Bitch.
Yeah. There's she has some meaty things to work with for sure. And
can I ask?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you a question about something else that I always think about when I associate with this movie. Okay. Do you have a strong opinion about them introducing this fear that Jason has of water? Does it strike you in any particular way?
Yeah, because we talked about how it's just like, well, he is afraid of water. Or he died by water. It's like, first of all, he never died, but okay. But yeah, right. I thought it was stupid because, like, first when he's confronting Freddy and that like one little stream of water comes down, all I could think of is, like, when I watched it the other night, was like, walk around it. Walk around it. I mean, after that, like, Freddy then had like water coming down from like all ends of the room, but in that instance he was just looking at it like, what do I do? It's like, you know, like a little insect like crawling around, and you put like a piece of paper down, like, oh, can't move forward. Don't know where to go now. I'm fucked.
And even an insect would try to find a way.
Yeah, and the whole, it's just introducing that and then turning into the child, which I guess they did in Jason Takes Manhattan. But I mean, I'm not. Yeah. That's in and of itself not like a benchmark of the Friday the 13th franchise. The thing is, like, I don't know if this is necessarily the worst of either of those franchises. Which is crazy to think, because I think this is a terrible movie, but they've done a lot worse. So I don't know. At this point, I take it for what it is, but there's nothing in it that I take any enjoyment out of. Like, there's like other, like, you know, the few moments, but I don't relish the experience. I don't relish, like, oh, I get to watch Freddy versus Jason again. It's more of like a chore. And, you know, there's a few movies like that we go through, and I just don't want to do it, you know?
Okay.
Happy to be here, everyone. But,
sure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, again, like the production design decisions and everything like that, not the direction I would have gone in, but there are things about it, particularly as the movie's being introduced, little things that are laced in that to kind of like seduce you in, that to draw you in as an audience member, that kind of work for me even on repeat viewings. Even something as simple as when the New Line logo comes up glowing in red and you hear the ding 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 ding, It's like, oh, because it's it. And then the fact that we open with like that narration from Freddy, I already mentioned the doll and everything, but just that's another thing I always associate with this movie is just like the close up on Freddy's eyes, the close up on Freddy's mouth while he's, unlocking
with the CGI teeth and
were the teeth CGI? Those
all of that looked CGI to me. I don't know. This movie is
the reflective surface on the eye looked like he was wearing like full lenses to me, but I don't know. Maybe
I'm not sure. There, like, so much of this movie was CGI. Like the blood,
so much of it was, and when it is, a lot of it is ineffective. I agree with you there. The only readily identifiable CGI thing that I like that kind of works for me because it gives me like that hasn't been done yet is the caterpillar that goes after Freeburg. I like the caterpillar smoking from the hookah to try and draw him in because he's a pot smoker. I'm like, okay,
I don't not like it, but I mean, like, at the same time it's everything that surrounds it, the whole sequence of like we were breaking into here and the whole plan, because I even think about it now. It has a little bit, like, it makes more sense than, the whole plot of Jason Goes to Hell, but there's a lot of it that is just like, how did you get here? And why are these people with you? That's how I look at it. And you mentioned the 1428 or whatever the address is of the house, because I think about the house and it's just like, what purpose is it that we needed the same house other than like iconography? Lori living in Nancy's house has nothing to do with anything. Like, Nancy's never brought up. There's no reason that, like, Jason specifically went to them. Like, Jason chose them. Like, Freddy wasn't like, you're going to go to 1428 Elm Street. He just said Elm Street. And it was just like the people that happened to be in this house who somehow had a connection to Freddy. So it's like a lot of it feels very arbitrary with certain characters. It's just like, these were the kids we had to deal with. Like, there's a lot of kids at that school. Did you notice that one of the extras was actually Evangeline Lilly, Wasp from the MCU?
No.
Yeah, she's the one that's she's got like green sleeves on, like a shirt with green sleeves. She's the one that's she's standing against the locker when strawberry blonde kid comes walking down, whatever his name is. The one that's like
Mark.
Yeah, when he's being all creepy and everyone's
Caffeine,
like,
make friends with it.
Yeah, everyone's like looking at him like what the fuck? She's the one that's standing right next to him and just like, what's
okay, I got. Next time I watch, I'll look for her. Awesome.
Yeah, which is, I guess this was like pre-fame for her, pre-anti-vax or whatever.
Just a young actress in Vancouver or wherever they shot.
Was this in Vancouver?
Toronto, wherever they shot it. I think it might have been Toronto. I can look it up.
Oh, you know what? All of Canada and U.S. production movies looks the same. There's just like, it's just generic, like whether it be Screevy or Jason Takes Manhattan. Or any Canadian town passing through.
Oh, looks like they went to both. They did Toronto, they did Vancouver, they did British Columbia, Bunsen Lake. Oh, that was one thing that I wanted to say. Like, I was convinced that most of what they did in the dream sequence part, or shall we say the nightmare sequence of Crystal Lake was CGI, and it is, but not the way I thought it was. Like, it was interesting to see in the making of, at some point in my life, I watched them do not only, Jason Voorhees and him drowning and shit, and suddenly I, for some reason, realized it's you. But after he's drowning Jason and everything, and then Jason gets popped out because he woke up, and Freddy turns around and looks at her, all that follows, like him, his stunt double leaping out of the lake and landing on the dock, and that anger and everything like that was all practical. That was an actual stunt person being pulled out of the actual lake to land on a wire, like being suspended from a wire onto the dock. And now that I know that, I find that incredibly impressive. And other, like, again, like minutia of filmmaking, things that I'm just kind of like, oh, totally thought that was CGI. The two bodies, or even just two dummies, the two bodies being flung into the lake, those were stunt people who were dressed up as Freddy and Jason after they're fighting on the construction site. And also, why is there construction on Crystal Lake?
It looked like they're constructing a amusement park. It was like a roller coaster or something. Well, there was like a billboard. There was like they were like developing houses or something. I didn't. It went by so quickly because the sign fell off.
Maybe rebuilding like Tina's house from Seven. Maybe like.
Do you really think that
like
they
it was
went?
on the wrong
do you
side of-
really think that they went
No,
delved that deeply? Into
No, they did. They didn't care. They didn't care.
Yeah.
But just like little practical things like that I can appreciate now that I know went into the filmmaker, because that's commitment from like a performer to just like be put in basically a catapult with another performer and just be flung across a lake and just kind of hope that, it'll happen. Because, the explosion that happens right before that dock moment where the mysterious legs are kind of, slouching toward.
And they're not
Will
even moving.
and
They could
Lori.
have like jumped
No,
into
they're
the
just
water.
sitting there
They're
like,
just sitting there like,
we're locked
for
in
like
our
a good
comic
like
book panel
20
position.
seconds. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's a comic book panel. That's all it is. But but the prior to that, the explosion that happens, I know that was set up to explode only, in a very contained kind of way, like that they could capture with the camera. And it melted some of the cameras. It exploded way more than they thought it would. And after it was over, Monica Keena, I love watching her break it down. She's like, after it was over, we looked to the crew and they're just kind of like, okay, well, that was unexpected. That's destroyed. Is everyone all right? Like, just kind of in the aftermath, and everybody was all right, and they went on with their shooting, whatever they had to do that night.
Yeah.
But, little stories, again, like things like that, like I really appreciated watching Never Sleep Again and the Crystal Lake Memories because it's featured in both of them, and just kind of getting the stories from people about what it was like to work on it and hearing them confirm some of the things that have always bugged me about the movie. It makes me like it a little bit more. But there's one thing that has never worked for me, and I want to ask you about this as well.
All right,
if
last
you
question.
Okay, if you have any idea.
All right.
What, Zach, from your perspective, happened in the house the night that Lori's mother was killed? What happened?
So the way that I interpreted that is that the mom was having a nightmare. And Freddy was coming after her. Why? Because I guess adults now can dream of Freddy Krueger as well. So Freddy was attacking her, and she was convulsing or whatever. The dad went down to get a kitchen knife because I guess he thought some invisible entity was attacking her, or I guess he knew, like, because the townspeople knew about Freddy or something. So
Freddy, right?
Yeah. Maybe he was like getting prepared for that, and then. Will was, doing the old Glenn thing of just like walking up climbing up the trellis and I guess walked up to the wrong bedroom, I guess, because he's never done that before. It was all very ill conceived. Why? Do you have a perception of it?
Not at all, because I'm even confused more so by what Lori says in her explanation to Will at the lake when she's urgently just conveying it, because she unpacks the events like in a very weird way and abstract, and then finally just kind of lets us in like, and my dad covered it up to protect me. And I'm like, well, wait. So we know your dad was hiding. Like with the Hypnosil, which I appreciate the incorporation of Hypnosil again from Dream Warriors. Thank you very much. But so your dad was keeping things from you because he wanted to keep Freddy, like the genie in the bottle, keep him in a box so the pandemic can't spread of Freddy, amongst the young people and everything like that, particularly his daughter. But did your dad know what was going on? Like, it doesn't answer any questions for me. It only creates more. That's why I wanted to ask you from your vantage point, what does that explanation even mean? Because it is like the rest of this movie. It gives you an inkling, but it just kind of leaves you off to make your own decisions at the end of the day.
It's just the whole thing is very underwritten. But sometimes overwritten in terms of like the dialogue of certain things. So who knows? But before we get onto the cherry picker, I did want to just ask you rankings of the Friday, not the whole franchise, but just of the Friday movies that we've covered and the Nightmare movies that you've covered. And
the ones that we've covered?
You can incorporate Freddy versus Jason into each one of them. So just for anyone listening, so far we've done Friday 1, 2, and we've done Nightmare 1 and 2, and Freddy vs. Jason.
I have so much more fun watching the other 2 movies in each franchise that we've watched thus far
Absolutely.
than I do watching Freddy vs. Jason. So it's at the bottom rung. For Friday the 13th, I have Friday 2, Friday 1, Freddy vs. Jason, and for Nightmare on Elm Street, it's Nightmare. This is odd. It's odd to put Nightmare 2 over Freddy vs. Jason. Wait, I have to think about this because I enjoy Nightmare 2 a great deal. We covered that, but it's very angsty. It's hard to watch sometimes. But if you ask me which one would you rather watch right now, I would say maybe it's just because I just watched Freddy vs. Jason, but I think I'd usually probably say Freddy's Revenge. Against what we still haven't figured out.
And then Freddy vs. Jason.
And then Freddy vs. Jason. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's not a complex ranking. But
no, not
I'm
really,
right there with you.
Really.
Friday 2, 1, Freddy. Nightmare 1, 2, Freddy vs. Jason. You say angsty. All I remember is the bit where after Freddy comes out of Mark's body and then Lisa's there and he like swipes that thing off of the shelf, like, take that, like a cat. You decorative plate. Okay, let's get to the cherry picker.
It's not like we killed people on purpose.
So we need to pick a cherry on top. I mean, there's a few.
Yeah, there are. Like you go first.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I was just gonna say, there's always the tried and true Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger.
Of course.
There's Gibb.
Yes.
There is Mrs. Voorhees, Paula Shaw. So I don't know. Those are the 3 that I can think of right now.
Yeah. Fuck. Because I was all ready to be gung ho about Gibb, because Robert Englund can always be a cherry on top for one of his other Freddy movies too. I'm sure. Maybe has he been yet? I can't remember.
I can't remember. Someone's keeping track of our cherry on tops. It's not us.
He will if he hasn't already. He definitely will be at some point. But in this case, I was so ready to go with Gibb, but then I'm thinking just like, what does it taste like? Like I'd like saying her lines more. Even more than, I think the line I laugh at hardest with Catherine Isabel is the, what the fuck do you think? Yeah. But I don't do that line a lot.
I also don't, I don't remember Catherine Isabel until I'm watching the movie. Like, I don't, when someone mentions Freddy versus Jason, or I see, like, the cover for it, not that I forget that Catherine Isabel is in it, but I never think of her character. Whereas I might think of, like, and this is probably in large part due to you and your dramatic reenactment of it, but I always think of the not Mrs. Voorhees. And,
I'm cool with that.
And in a way, that's kind of Freddy Krueger, because it's not Mrs. Voorhees, it is Freddy Krueger. So
it's Freddy as Jason's mother. So yes,
a little bit of both. So we're gonna give
Yay! Pamela Voorhees. Suck it, bitches.
Yeah. All right. So last week we asked you who deserves to die the most in Cujo. I nominated Old Man Joe Camber. You nominated New Man Steve Kemp. I don't know what else to call a new man.
Okay.
Because he is the new man in her life. Across Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube.
Hello, new man.
That's how the husband could have like answered it, like,
yes, that would have been amazing. Oh my god, that would have been amazing.
All right, across Instagram, Patreon, YouTube, 346 for Joe Camber versus 288 for Steve Kemp.
Ooh, let's hear
if I had them. Here we go. Grant Dempsey. My name is Alice, and I remember everything. I think that some of these are out of order. I think they were more so in context with like other people posting, because
Oh, okay.
a lot of people are
okay.
posting and they're like, I don't know who these people are. So I think that was in response to that. And I'm just going in the order of what pops up here. But Blue Box 87 says, I don't remember Joe, but I choose him. Thomas Baker says, I don't remember Steve, but I choose him. TV
Okay.
Porter, I don't remember what day it is, but I choose Steve. Sean Prinsick, I don't remember either of these characters. Aside from the scenes where mom and the kid were trapped in the car, it wasn't very memorable. The wiki plot synopsis introduces Joe Chamber as abusive mechanic. That's good enough for me, so he gets my vote. Personally, I thought Tad was super annoying, and I just wanted him to die. I heard that the original ending from the book, Tad died in the end. They changed it for the film due to test audiences. If only they could have kept the original ending. I vote for Joe Chamber, but my conscience and my heart will always vote for Tad. When in doubt, kill off the whiny kid who's suffering a heat stroke.
Oh my god.
Adams Bree. I don't remember either, but I choose Joe. I feel like I won, like, just because
By default.
Yeah. Like, why couldn't that have happened last week when it counted, you know?
What it mattered to you.
Zammy, my Naker Schnack Shmoth. Okay, I haven't seen
dear.
Cujo in decades. What did these dudes do? See Cujo, and you'll know. Hamish. I guess I'll go for Steve, because, like, he was sleeping with a married woman. If I could, I would vote for the rabies virus, if that's allowed by cherry picker law.
That's not allowed.
It's not, no.
It's against the rules.
It's against the rules, yeah. Also, I love how everyone in this comment section can't remember anyone.
Yeah.
Joa Pedro just says, I don't. And then Silent
Okay.
Saturn says, both are garbage people, but I vote for Zach's pick, because every time... Should I read this?
Uh-oh.
Every time Eddie wins, he does that high-pitched, oh my god, and it hurts my ears when I listen with headphones. Sorry. Oh my
That's
god!
hilarious.
I won!
I don't do
that
it like
one?
no.
Do you-
That, oh my god! You.
What do you
no,
do?
Okay, you put me to shame.
do
I was
it.
like, oh my god! I think I just do that.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think. I don't know. I'm trying to think like when I win, like physical memory. what
Let
does
me
my
like
body do?
Men
And
in
it does
Black
that.
like flash you right now. We'll go through this again with you as the winner and just see if anything changes. Okay.
No, just go back to an episode where I won, and you'll see. I'm sure I do it every time. I probably do. Sorry, guys.
It is what it is. I am beside myself here. I don't know who they all fucking deserve to die in this movie. I cannot pick one.
You can't do that.
It's
the rules.
so,
Those are the rules.
I know the rules. I pretty much made them up without any of your help.
Yeah.
I asked for your input, and you're like, I don't know. That sounds fine.
No, I was like, I don't care. Just tell me what they are so I can play by them. I don't
know
care.
You're difficult that way.
true.
I'm gonna pick the character of Sheriff Williams, because he's just a generic sheriff character that we've seen so many times. There's nothing particularly distinct in his flavor that he adds in terms of like the rest of this franchise. At least some of these people that I don't like, such as Trey or Blake or Kia or I don't know, like they're memorable. So I'm gonna pick the totally bland, totally unmemorable Sheriff Williams, because he was just shitty. He represented repression and authoritarianism, and just I didn't like the way that he spoke to not Ryan Phillippe, just an all around shitty cop. So yeah,
Okay.
that's what I'm going for.
Okay. I am going. I don't need to take much time explaining this. I'm choosing Frizzell, the glow stick guy, the one with the bleach hair, who
Q-tip.
crawls on top of Catherine Isabel or Gibb, as she's passed out at the party in an attempt to try and assault her. So no further explanation necessary as far as I'm concerned. He does die, but I would have liked for him to have suffered more, to kind of know, yeah, you're dying because you're a horrible person. Anyway.
Maybe he could have, like, because when his body went, like, flinging up in the air, it could have, like, fallen on, like, a spike or something that was, like, set up in the cornfield.
Right.
Just to see, like, because we never saw his body after. He just went, like, Looney Tunes flying out of the frame. That's what this movie is. This is, like, I mean, not that, like, Looney Tunes is nothing new for A Nightmare on Elm Street, because we did have whatever that shit was in 6. But, the bodies... flying everywhere. It's a bit much. So.
Yeah, the pinball machine of it all when Freddy's
thrusting his pelvis.
Jason, oh god, tilt and everything. I'm like, not quite.
It's a bit much. Yeah.
Anyway, there you go, folks.
Vote your heart, vote your conscience. You can vote on Instagram, YouTube. You can also, if you are supporting on Patreon, you get an extra vote there. So check that out. This month's After Dark special, Edward, do you want to let them know what it is without, fucking around?
Disney villains. I think we covered it in the last.
We
episode
did, but
too.
I mean,
Disney
it's always
villains.
good to Disney villains.
We're going to talk about them.
That's going to be the final week of August, so we're really excited about that because Disney is it's gateway horror. And if you are new to the Cherry Picker and you are listening to us, head over to our YouTube, subscribe there, and you can watch our faces as we discuss this. And if you are watching on YouTube, the RSS feed link is in the descriptions down below. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else podcasts can be listened to. We are on Instagram, as I said, Cherry Picker Pod, the Cherry Picker Pod. And we're also on TikTok. That's a new thing that is exciting because I don't know anything about TikTok, but boy, Cried Wolf does. So thank you to him again for TikTokifying us. So follow us there. Edward, what are your socials?
One of my socials, I've also been TikToked individually, so you can find me Edward is Truth, one word, traditional spelling on the TikTok. Same thing on Letterboxd, same thing on YouTube, and same thing on the Instagram, the generic Instagram. But that's where I am the most, but I'm still just getting my footing with TikTok. I had an idea, and I just didn't have time to carry it out, so stay posted. How about you?
I do have a TikTok that I just started for the purposes of this. Don't follow me there. I mean, you can if you want. I do not plan on making any content. I don't know how to make TikTok content. It's so foreign to me. I wish I knew. But I appreciate instead of going to my TikTok, just go to the Cherry Picker Pod TikTok. But you can find my YouTube channel, Zach Cherry, ZACKCHRECHERRY. It's a made up last name. You can also find me on Instagram at RetroBitchFace. I'm also on Letterboxd, Zach Cherry. And what else do we? Twitter, Zach Cherry 8. Is there another one that I'm missing? I don't know. You'd think that I would be used to it by now, but
look in the description if you're watching, and if you're
that's
not,
true. It is. We even in the listening app. It's
even in the
there.
listening. Look in the description. Yeah.
But we do have another episode coming up next week. So Edward, do you know what it is?
Yeah, it's that one where that person has to face something.
You don't know, do you?
It's daunting. Is it?
You don't
know. I have no idea.
No fucking idea. See, this is what I'm talking about, the fucking around. It's you're next.
Oh, that one. Okay,
You're
I like
next.
that one.
Yeah, it's a great home invasion one. And it's I believe this is the 10-year anniversary from its theatrical release.
Shit.
It's a little bit older than that because it did come out. Initially, it premiered at a film festival in 2011. We'll get into all of that. Sure. It's a great movie though, so if you need to get caught up, watch it, and we will be back to talk about that next week. So thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and we will be right back.